welcome to Paranormal Insight. I'm your host, Tim Sudano, and with me tonight is Zoey Quinn and ZoahVan Ecklensberg of Mind Matter Mystery, the podcast. They're going to be all over the place. You're going to hear about them really soon. They're not quite out yet, but very soon. They're going to tell us all about that a little bit later on. But tonight, they're going to answer a few of my questions. We got to talking over Instagram, and I put them to a task. Why do monsters have the diets that they do? Vampires drink blood, werewolves eat hearts. Why? So, to answer that question, and without further ado, Zoey Noah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This is really great to be here. So, yeah.
Happy to have you.
Super exciting.
And this is such an interesting topic too. You know, I was really excited to really dive into this. So yeah, I hope we put on, a good show for everyone. But yeah, we got some stuff. So
excellent. Well, let's start with the biggie. Let's start with probably the one you probably had the most. That's what my assumption, because in my own research, I found that I had the most information on vampires, and I know there's a ton of information on vampires, different kinds of vampires, that type of thing. So what did you find out about vampires? Why do they drink blood?
So what I gathered, which was quite a bit, and I tried to get into a little bit of everything across the board, as well as some like speculation, and as well as from history, and then also from modern culture. So I kind of wrote up everything I've learned about that. So I'll kind of read from that as I kind of also notate it. First, I'll cite quickly some of the websites and YouTube channels, articles, etc. that I used. So time.com, Thought Potato channel on YouTube, D&D Monster Manual, of course, which will come up, historicmysteries.com, wikipedia.com, link.springer.com with an article, Split Brain, What We Know and Why, ancientorigins.net article, .net, the article of the Lamia of ancient Greek mythology, the ancient boogeyman, a YouTube channel called Ancient Greece R with a video on Lamia, another website called thevintagenews.com with an article, The Horrifying Real Origins of Zombies, and history.com, gizmodo.com, and another YouTube called Nightmare Tales. Those are kind of some sightings. If people have questions or want to do their own research, go check them out.
I'll need that list, by the way, so I can put it in the information.
Yeah, we're gonna have a list with everything we sourced for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of get the sighting out the way, and
it'll all be organized too. So we got you on that.
Much appreciated.
So as I go into this, both of you feel free to just chime in and cut me off, ask questions if you do, and
I will.
If I have anything I can answer, that is from the knowledge I gained, and then otherwise I will tell you if it's just my own opinion or whatever. So, so this question is a lot deeper than one might think.
Oh yeah, it really is. It really is. When I first heard about
I figured as much. When I asked the question, I knew immediately that there was different types of vampires. That there were, different types of vampires, and different cultures have different reasons why they exist.
So and so kind of with that, that's why I took such a broad sweep across everything, because I wanted to try and get from across different cultures, and then also from different kinds of creatures. But obviously I went into vampires a little more heavily at first. So many of these monstrosities, especially including vampires, carry their diet in their legends. So vampires drinking blood, werewolves eating hearts and people, animals, and of course, like the Wendigo eats everything. And zombies eat brains. But it's not often that we actually question why. So again, this is why, like, when you brought it to me, I was like, oh yeah, this will be fun. And then like I started reading and I was like, okay, nobody actually answers this question. Like, it's not obvious. This isn't like a common, everybody can tell you what they eat, but nobody says like, oh, this is why. So you kind of have to like dig into it a little bit. Needless to say, I was super excited. But so yeah, I didn't really realize the challenge it presented, but here we are. So it seems obvious at first in a way that vampires drink blood. You know, when I began to consider why, though, I did get stuck. Like, okay, they need to drink blood to survive, as we humans need to eat food to live. But it became clear that any representation of a vampire came to me from pop culture and popularized notions of blood-sucking parasites from movies and video games, and even, like I said, Dungeons and Dragons having their own version of vampires.
Yes, D&D. Yeah,
So,
I mean, it's important to touch on that. Actually, let me pause you right there. It is important to touch on that. That there is a lot of stuff that the fantasy world tapped into to tell the tale. So it's really good. So keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, as you watch this episode, that yes, fantasy will actually have tidbits of hopefully truth in these descriptions. Please continue.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, that's exactly it. And that's kind of why I do bring them up, because you know, like you said, like they all derive from the origins of these things. So and even within the origins, the more you go back, the more confusing it gets, because you have all these pockets of cultures that had the same thing, but it was slightly different. So needless to say,
definitely.
Yeah, I'll take the step with saying, obviously many of us know the tale of Dracula. And this was actually
Bram Stoker.
I am.
Okay. Bram Stoker. We're starting
so
there.
we're gonna like
right,
I'm doing like a Tarantino where you start in the middle and then jump back and forth.
Yeah,
I can appreciate that. Okay.
So yes, Bram Stoker, an Irishman of the late 19th century. So an interesting part of his tale that Bram had actually released the first version of it in Iceland, and it was actually called Macht Myrkana, which translates to power of darkness. So yeah, so if you ask me, it's honestly like a way cooler title.
Way better, yeah.
So yeah,
especially
power
now,
of darkness.
it's been watered down.
Oh yeah. So that's what gets
been
interesting with this, because this kind of caught me off guard when I read about this. So Dracula is actually a Wallachian word for devil. It's spoken as voivode. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but hey, whatever. Voivode. So it's a name said to be given to the brave or the mad, i.e., you know, Vlad the Impaler. That's kind of where he picked up the name. It was kind of given to him.
I think the proper pronunciation is Vivad.
Vivad, there you go.
Vivad. Okay.
And obviously, you know, Dracula, meaning like son of the dragon, etc. So again, it gets a little confusing in there. I didn't go and find like actual manuscripts of so pardon my language.
It's all right.
Yeah, so supposedly Bram's Dracula, which was released in London on May 26, 1897, was actually a cut version. His original that was previously released in Iceland contained the quote unquote truth of the story. So certain facts.
Like what?
Yeah.
What was excluded?
So apparently he had allegedly uncovered what pointed to something all too real for the English public to be exposed to. So he went into he actually took a bunch of research, because he wasn't the original progenitor of Dracula. There were some other various ones.
Really?
But they weren't he's kind of what made it famous and made it what it was. So like I said, This basically involves a ship named the Dimitri that sailed from an Eastern European port of Varna to Whitby Harbor. And I didn't quite look into connecting it exactly, but I do believe that this is where that new movie is drawing from, with the whole like the boat and everything, because it's called something different of what the movie is. I forget, but I didn't write that down. But it was originally called the Dimitri.
Okay.
So the London publishers would have him cut the first 100 pages because they didn't want to act a panic around the actual vampires existing. So needless to say, Bram took the lore and legend of an ancient creature and brought it to life, releasing it into our reality, capturing our fears and curiosities of us all. So that's really, I think, what made it, what it was. Plus taking it to London made it kind of pop harder, I guess.
Right. So that gave us essentially the Western vampire, the more modern Western world vampire. Okay.
Exactly. And that's kind of why I found it like almost important to start there, because the vampire takes the form we know about from here. But again, like it all draws from, these older like accounts or traditions. Okay, so Bram had taken his studies from the library in Whitby, England, where he would uncover the location and tales of Dracula from a book called The Accounts of Principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia. Yet, as many of us know, this legend goes even further back to around 1,000 years ago, where the tales of vampire began to take form in the first place.
Right. So it was centered in Moldavia.
Right. And so that's where he took, essentially he went and this book couldn't be like rented or taken from the library. He had to go and like sit down and read it there. And then
nice.
Like he wasn't, because it was like it's the only one. And
the only copy. Oh wow. That's intense.
Man, that better be a good book for that travel.
So
so he talking about it today, so I guess it worked.
It was. Yeah, obviously.
So anybody interested in pursuing that still exists is The Accounts of Principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia. So apparently he went specifically to look for like the path that this took from like Transylvania, or some even speculate Scotland. I don't know how that got mixed in there. Again, there's so much to this that I couldn't
I've never heard Scotland included in that history before.
Which again, I didn't dive enough into that because I just wanted to, like, there was so many other things I constantly get distracted with.
No, I understand. So, the vampire is a huge undertaking. But go ahead.
A rabbit hole.
So now we're gonna travel back 1,000 years ago. To where like vampire began to actually take form. So it was actually in Bulgaria where the Slavic vampire, which originally translates to ghost monster, made its way to German-speaking Romans who conquered the Slavic people, and then eventually tales would make their way to France and England. So I found this really interesting because that's what their translation for it was. A vampire meant ghost monster.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Now, do you use that tie in with the word strigoi, or is that later on?
So I think that is a little bit after, and then also like the thing is like it's all shifted between like different villages and like, so it could all be within the same area, but then that knowledge travels differently throughout.
Ghost monster.
So ghost monsters. So again, I kind of go into a bit of history because I think it's important to understanding the reasons behind why we assign these bits of knowledge of why. So they were so the ghost monster was actually an incorporeal horror that was feared for spreading disease among the villages of Romania, striking fear into the hearts of the people who took residence and giving a face, so to speak, to what we know today as common viruses and bacteria.
They thought it was all spirits.
It was a spirit.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes sense, right? They don't know about right. They don't have the technology and the tools we have today. So it's like if something like that is plaguing your village, right, or your city you're living in, it makes sense, especially when a lot of them had wacky beliefs about gods and the afterlife and all of that. So
Mhm.
it really does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. And
Yeah, it does. It does to a degree. I mean, Catholicism was, we're talking about 1,000 years after the Roman Empire. Is that what you said? Is that where we're at now?
yeah, well, we're 1,000 years back from today. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay. So
yeah.
okay, gotcha. So it was evil spirits.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So, and that's what's actually interesting is like the vampire isn't as old as we think, which we'll kind of get into after this part once I begin to go into zombies and stuff. And it actually kind of zombies, the vampire comes more from zombies, I think, from what I've uncovered, than the other way around. So, yeah. So as we see, the tale of the vampire was beginning to, take form as the spreader of a disease, which again, to go back to our like modern lore, is like a lot of vampire in like games and movies, they're like immune to disease. So very interesting.
We're just carriers.
Yeah, and carriers. So yeah, so this theme would carry throughout the evolution of this blood-sucking horror, from the bloated bodies of dead loved ones in the Middle Ages, where people would preemptively cover the graves of the dead with everything from heavy stone to a stake in the heart, to the Irish, who would shove large rocks into the mouths of the dead, again, to prevent the bloodsucker from rising to feed on the living.
It's interesting you mentioned that. In the episode before this, I did a short editorial about a 400-year-old vampire girl, was what they called it in the thing. The reality is that the child died bad, disease or something along those lines. So they put a padlock on her feet. This is in Poland, what's now Poland. I guess it was always Poland, but I don't know. But so 400 years ago, they were really afraid of the dead coming back to life.
Wow.
And so they padlocked this child to her coffin. And there was a woman found kind of next door to her in another burial plot, and they were really afraid of her because not only was she padlocked to the coffin, a scythe was placed over her neck.
Oh my God.
If she sat up, gone. So they were really afraid of these things coming back to life.
I wonder what caused that fear. Like
that's the question I asked in my editorial.
Yeah. That is
like, what happened?
Yeah.
I mean, something had to have happened to cause them to be so afraid, right? To like go that far.
There was a time where our ancestors in general, being fearful, not being too knowledgeable about life and death and what happens to the human body, they also didn't understand things like epilepsy or things like narcolepsy things that make you pass out and go for hours. Like if you have Rip Van Winkle syndrome, I can't talk tonight. If you have Rip Van Winkle syndrome, you're going to sleep forever, and your breathing is super shallow. The doctors didn't have the best tools back then. And it was basically just a little mini trumpet that they put through the ear, put to the chest. It's like, I don't hear a heartbeat. And they'd actually wait on the body for a few days. And if blood started to trickle out, because that's how decomp works, kids, but blood starts to trickle out, they would nail them to the coffin with the stake, like you pointed out. And then they would also yeah, it was pretty gruesome. Now, if they were in waiting and this person was in a Rip Van Winkle state, epilepsy, whatever it was, and they sat up, came to life while they're waiting in that waiting period, they would be killed like that. No
Yeah,
excuses. Sorry,
that's-
you're back from the dead. That's it.
That's a reasonable thing to do. Yeah, given the situation.
Back in the
That's funny.
day, I
Off
could
with your
see it.
head.
Back in the day, no one had any knowledge of any of these weird diseases that's pretty common to humanity, or even uncommon to humanity.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's
I
brutal.
see. Yeah.
That's
So
brutal.
that is cool because as you see, like we kind of have some explanations and more possible reasons for all that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like the scythe around the neck thing,
Yeah.
and I don't know, that's scary. Imagine like
Yeah.
you die and then you don't die, you wake up and then they're just like they stab
Yeah,
you.
there's a scythe above you, like
Mhm.
you're padlocked in.
Oh yeah, you're hosed. If you wake up during that, oh well, sorry.
Just go back to sleep.
Yeah, go back to sleep and go for that eternal sleep type of thing.
Yeah.
Now there was
Yeah.
also a period in it wasn't too long, but they actually had a mechanism to where if you were possibly buried alive, they'd have a little string that ran from inside
Oh, I've heard
the
of this.
casket
Yeah,
up to the tombstone. There was a little bell there. And if you woke
And
up in your
that's-
casket, ding-a-ling-a-ling.
And that's where we
Still
get the
alive.
saying, that's where we get the saying, for whom the bell tolls.
Yep.
yeah. It's crazy
Uh,
because someone had to have been buried alive for them to put that in.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Like,
think if I remember the story of the first instance before they did the bell thing, it was a horribly rainy day that this person was buried
oh,
alive.
no. It's bad
And
enough to be buried alive, let
never
alone
mind, he was
rainy.
buried alive, but he was fortunate in that he was able to break through his coffin,
Oh,
and
God.
it was so muddy, he was able to get out of the grave. And he stumbles
he
into
Uma Thurman'd it.
Oh, I see.
for
Yeah,
sure.
they got him a bad coffin, so that's
And
good.
or
Oh,
whatever.
God.
I mean, he punched his way out and he stumbles in, he's covered in mud, and it's like, what's going on? He scares the hell out of everyone.
Oh, I
And
bet.
I think a priest stepped in at the last second, kept him from getting killed by the mob. And so, okay, get the doctor over here, because the guy wasn't a threat. He was just super confused.
Yeah, but buried alive.
But that
like,
was what
Oh my
sparked the
God.
bell in the casket.
Yeah,
that
Ugh.
is crazy.
Good time.
that's
Horrifying.
horrifying.
Thank
It is
you
like a
for
worse
ruining my
fear.
night. Yeah, gonna have nightmares tonight.
I'm sorry. Please continue with your.
No. I'm having fun, so that's why like all this extra information is just like keep us going. But this is where the fun's at for me.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. So yeah, like I said, we have all these different forms of kind of how people would handle it, putting heavy stone, rocks in the mouth. And then now we have like these modern iterations, all the way to now where it's like this hypersexualized romantic figure with heightened abilities and senses. And of course, the controversial glittery skin. So
I don't know what that author was thinking.
Glittery skin.
I mean,
I
gotta hand it to them. They turned it into a movie franchise, and billions of dollars later, they're laughing all the way to the bank.
Mhm.
But the glittery vampire, yeah, that was fantastic. We shine like diamonds. That's why we have to stay in the dark.
Yeah. So I actually loved the
it.
first movie, but
I saw the first
Um,
one and I was laughing so hard I just couldn't take the rest of it seriously.
yeah. Well, I was like 16 when it came out, so I was
you
like
were at the
into
prime.
it.
You're right there. The demographic.
I was
right on.
that was the target of that 16 emo girl. But yeah, so the vampire is of course a creature loved and feared, and but it's one of the various monsters and creatures of old that roam our haunted nights and kind of loom on the edge of our fears of our reality. And I kind of say that because it gets into later my point of like what these monsters represent. But this all brings us back to, again, the challenging question of why. Like, why do vampires drink blood?
That's the question.
And Some speculation comes to us from the modern times of its inception, as tales of such a creature took shape and became what it is today. So when a person dies, there are very, many physiological responses, kind of as we spoke of, the bloating skin, pushing the blood to the extremities, the orifices of the body, twitching from muscle spasms, not muscle spasms.
I knew what you meant.
I know.
Thanks for the correction.
Yeah.
Save me from putting a little thing. She meant muscle spasms.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Rigor mortis, and then of course the other various responses that can be seen. So for many of the, let's say, ignorant dark ages, which of course is the reason for its descriptor, these physical responses to death brought up a question of what is happening to the person that died. And for some reason, someone somewhere began to explain this as the dead are rising once again to kill and drink the blood of the living, only to return to its coffin before daybreak, where it will once again rest. So besides being a captivating explanation to the ignorant, there are, lore enthusiasts, there are some psychological reasons why this would make sense. So the act of drinking blood gave this creature a more corporeal existence, essentially bringing
that
it
actually
into
makes sense from your ghost monster, right? Is that what it was called? The ghost monster? Okay.
Yeah.
So blood for the ghost monster. Gotcha.
And especially because a lot of these blood drinking tales became more popular during like the 1800s, where science really began to take off.
Yeah.
It made it essentially brings it into our reality, as opposed to being something that's invisible and untouchable. Okay. So like I said, as science began to develop, this gave us a stronger sense of realism with the vampire and a scientific explanation. So in addition to this, is that many cultures, actually for many generations, blood has actually been used for medicinal purposes. Usually to false effect, but nonetheless,
the blood of your grandfather. Trust me, it's
nonetheless, the blood that runs in our veins holds a deep semblance to our lives beyond just keeping us alive. So I'm going to do a little sidestep here, and I'll read through this really quickly because it's a big chunk of information.
Okay.
But this is just a more modern take, which I think you'll appreciate, and I just really found it like captivating. So I'm going to go towards the YouTube channel I mentioned, Thought Potato. So they do a more than fantastic job of bringing this this fabled monster
into their title wasn't so comical.
It's funny, but you get into it and it's like you get really into it. Like it's like very like they treat it like
potato. Yeah, potato's getting a mention here, I guess.
Yes.
Free shout out.
Yes.
For sure.
And of course, again, this is more of a scientific explanation through biology of how this could be a real event, even more to the point of why the creature needs to drink the blood of humans to survive in the first place.
Okay.
Through a mutagenic virus. So I'm going to briefly quote and paraphrase a small portion of the fictional account that Thought Potato came up with because I just really liked it.
Okay.
But it does kind of, again, give us some answer in some form, be it true or not. Well, it's not, but you can see how it would be.
It's a potential truth.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun, but it gives some reality to it.
It's more like a theory.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so again, I do recommend anyone interested in this to go check out their channel. And no, I did not give their permission, so don't hate me. So anyways, Thought Potato uses the premise of a fictional researcher who has uncovered the truth behind many monsters of legend to put together this beautiful scientific explanation. So a form of mononegavirales, the families, same family as rabies, mumps, and measles, would infect the victim through fluid exchange with the host, biting the neck and drinking their blood. This infects the victim's cells through endocytosis, a process meaning full absorption.
Yeah.
It would be highly effective in infecting every living cell without destroying it, all except for the red blood cells. It would allow the cells to continue their regenerative process while hijacking them to reproduce more infected cells, spreading rapidly throughout the body and transforming the victim. A rapid replication cycle through the thyroid gland would initially increase the speed of metabolic processes throughout the body, and the incubation would be rapid 6 to 12 hours. And those infected will display an array of symptoms similar to the flu, which lasts another 6 to 12 hours. And again, this is part of why I like bringing it up, because as we said before, even in like modern lore, it's drawing from like those tales of like you get bit, a day later you're a vampire.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
It's a little more in depth. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I just thought it would be fun to just kind of briefly go through this.
Okay.
So after 12 to 24 hours, the appearance of the victim slips into an empiric coma, where the final transformation occurs. And importantly, to note, and I find this not only to be creative, but it just makes sense, is that all victims would not all victims would survive this, as it'd be a taxing process. So children, the elderly, so typically the most susceptible would be adults 18 through 35. And the coma would last about a day until universally waking up at night. And of course, while in this state, the flu-like symptoms the victim would experience would lead to, them undergoing the anatomical physiological changes. And so with that, most victims go through the acclimation period with confusion, paranoia, malnutrition, thirst. So that's why you wake up and you're just ready to kill. And so through something called horizontal gene transfer, serotonin.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Go ahead.
Serotonin decreases, making urges more irresistible, while neural pathways associated with dopamine and endorphin release drastically increase, especially in response to feeding, which would make drinking blood extremely pleasurable. And so that's like a brief explanation of if this person sort of virus.
The genetics on that. That's pretty. Bravo, hot potato. All right.
Yeah.
Turned into a scientist. Let's get that cooking.
Yeah, man.
So,
well done.
Yeah. And I'm definitely not a scientist, so I definitely had to kind of take from what they said, because I was like, oh, this is genius. Like
it really is such an interesting take, though, the whole idea that it's really some type of virus or bacteria or something like that, just because the nature of how they feed is biting people and things like that. And yeah, but in my mind, like, I always kind of envision them as more of like a demonic force, if that makes sense, right? Not really that they were like, I don't know, like spreading viruses, I guess. I feel like that's, at least for me, initially going into it, I thought of that more of being like zombies, right? That's pretty obvious virus, but like, yeah, there was something more kind of demonic about vampires in general. It wasn't as simple as being a virus, but it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and film and TV and most other fictions have actually touched on that demonic aspect. There was Dracula 2000, I think, really touched on that, really dove into that aspect.
Yeah,
that it was largely a spiritual punishment, that Dracula was in fact Judah.
Oh,
way back when. Yeah, it's like that was his punishment. He gets to live forever as an evil entity sucking on the life of others.
Yeah.
Which is like an interesting kind of comparison, because some people, there are like, you can kind of equate it being like a dark form of Jesus, with the whole like taking of blood and eating of the flesh. So there are some takes that people do like approach.
Yeah, that's a very interesting comparison. I mean, I've always, when I first heard that, I was like, wait, you want what? You want me to what? Bread and wine equal what? What does that mean? Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
The priest
so
says it's okay.
yeah. Whatever, as long as you get drunk, right?
There wasn't that much wine. I was like, that's it. Anyway, go ahead.
Maybe that's how Jesus turned water into wine. He just dripped his blood into it.
Yeah, fermented his blood.
Dark. Trust me, it's wine. Trust me. He's gotten into himself. Oh man, we're going to hell.
Yeah. Well,
so, no. Let me pause you real briefly.
Yeah.
There was a interesting. I can't remember if it was something like a Sherlock Holmes spin-off kind of a deal or not, but it was set in that era when Bram Stoker was around.
Yeah.
And oh, you know what it was? It was that show that featured Arthur Conan Doyle and Houdini. And they were best friends at one point or another in reality. And whoever wrote this up just built on that. And they solved cases together. And they knew, since Arthur Conan Doyle was an author, he knew other authors, including Bram Stoker. And in that series, Bram Stoker was anemic and had to drink cow's blood to steady himself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he'd go to the butcher shop and buy a big old honking thing of cow's blood, and he'd work on, he'd live off of that for like 3 days, and then he'd have to go back again. And
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. That's
so, and apparently that was true. He was in fact anemic. So maybe that's where he kind of dove in. It's like, I wonder hey, you know what? Vampires like that too.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I mean,
it out. Yeah,
that would create like the human and emotional connection as the writer to seek out more of, how do I fix this and why am I like this? Who knows? Like he might have fantasized himself of being some sort of, vampire.
The way, I know where you're going. The way they portrayed him in the series, he was very much like a vampire. He couldn't be out in the sunlight that much because he was anemic, so he had like 0 D3 in the system. So he's like, oh my god, totally photosensitive. Always had to wear sunglasses. Again, portrayed in this TV series, and had to sickly looking, pale. So I think if he was actually anemic, and I think he was. That was his basis, and he heard the story of the vampire before, and he says, oh my god, so like you said, that gave him all that insight into
you would connect to that character a lot more if you had that. And then just for fun, let's just say maybe he was a vampire.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Which would explain his deeper knowledge for it. So but yeah, so I think like with this is that like, to answer why do vampires drink blood, again, it brings it into our reality. It gives it a sense of connection, because medicine, it was used as medicine, so it made sense that something could live off of it. As you just said, like somebody anemic back then might need to drink cow's blood. I don't know if that works, but I would try it if that's all I had.
Apparently it did. Yeah.
You need iron, and it would be in cow's blood.
That's exactly what anemia is. It's a complete lack of iron. So you drink the cow's blood in order to get it.
That's crazy.
And then otherwise, like it would just be, survival purposes. And then beyond that, it just goes down to what I'll kind of get into later, which is like the, natural fears of people. It's not a memorable story if it's not hunting humans. You know what I mean? Like it's not
right.
You're gonna stick around.
There has to be a victim.
Yeah.
If there's a monster, there has to be a victim, right?
I was going to touch on that too.
Yeah. So it's just a convenient way to make the vampire spooky.
For sure. Now, if I may, little bit of self-touting, but I'll do it.
Yeah.
Noah touched on the fact that he thought that the vampires leaned a little more demonic with their abilities and stuff. For me, it was a little bit closer to your description that Thought Potato came up with when I was creating TOL, which is the Trident of Light, which is a book series I have out. And in that story, it was a little more Star Trek-y to a degree. If
That's
Star
cool.
Trek-y is a word, I'll use it. Coined by Tim.
Good enough.
But it was a stellar fragment, like a small sliver of a stellar fragment from a supernova gazillion light years away that came to Earth and had a very specific radioactive signature. And it mutated just a few people in the Moldavia area. And that's what happened. It just mutated them to a degree to where they became these ghouls, these monsters. And it's
cool.
passed on through the bite as more of a snake venom, something akin to a venom. And I think we've even heard that used before in vampire lore, that it's, don't get the venom in you. So that's it.
That's genius. I love that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to read that.
It sounds really
I didn't know
good.
you had that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So what was your next step on the vampire train?
So actually, the next step on the vampire train actually requires dipping into zombies. So
let me pause you there then.
Yeah, I was gonna say before we go into that,
zombies,
we might have a little bit more.
We got a lot to talk about.
There is a ton to talk about. We may have to do this in parts.
Yeah, we might. I got some
It's
stuff
already
too.
almost at an hour here.
And
So
it's not about zombies or vampires or nothing. So
I know, it's amazing. So let me dip into Grecian history and myth. You probably touched on this too, Vector.
I did.
Yeah, this is kind of that's a direction I more took on the question. But yeah, go on.
Grecian Lamia was almost exactly the same, except they were almost strictly female. Women were the bad guy. A lot of those scenarios back then.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
Yeah.
The hell, man.
Yeah.
So I mean, so can you touch on Lamia briefly?
Yeah, we can go into Lamia. Yeah, so I went into the Lamia because it captures my interest. I already knew a little bit about it. I just decided to go into it. But I also chose it because of its versatility and how much its story and eating habits actually align with various other terrors and creatures from different cultures.
That's very true. I know where you're going to go with this, but go ahead.
Yep. So the Lamia, often referred to as the original boogeyman or boogie woman. So Lamia was again, it all depends on which version you're reading here. But Lamia was once an extremely beautiful queen of Libya who had an affair with Zeus. And his wife Hera, of course, did not take kindly to this act and turned Lamia into a child-eating demon, essentially.
Yes, she did.
So the various alternate tales of exactly how this all went down depend on when and where you're getting it from. But in short, Hera stole Lamia's children and either hid them away, killed them, or even in some accounts made Lamia kill them herself.
That's the one I heard.
Yeah.
The last one.
So Hera then cursed Lamia with insomnia. I just realized the connection of those words.
I got insomnia.
Which of course drove her mad, and she began stealing the children of others, just in her mania.
Yeah.
So Zeus actually would go on to try to correct this and give Lamia the ability to remove her eyes and foresee the future. I don't know how that's going to correct it. Zeus is a weird guy.
Zeus is a total horn dog too. I mean,
Yeah.
Hera would like just say, you know
Most
what,
of
buddy,
those-
I'm gone. You're out.
Yeah.
Get off
Most-
Olympus. Where's the divorce lawyer for the gods? Okay,
Got him
go
on
It was-
speed dial.
It was Hera.
She
Yeah,
kept
no,
putting
like you
up with
said,
it. That's the thing.
yeah,
How
it's
many
more of like
bastard
a.
children did this dude foster?
It seems like a place of dominance for her because like yeah, he just kept banging all these women and she just kept turning them into like terrible things.
Horrible monsters, yeah.
So the horrendous acts of Lamia begin to take a toll on her and turn her into a grotesque monster. Just as many of the beautiful women Zeus slept with, behind the back of Hera. So, including I'm forgetting the name.
Medusa,
I'll come back to
for
that.
starters.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Medusa. That's exactly what I was trying to say. I don't know why I
Medusa,
could not
yes,
remember that.
Of course.
Except for that tale is a little bit darker because apparently,
Oh, yeah.
spoiler or
Yeah.
trauma alert. It's against her will. Let's just say. So
Yes, but
Not a
her
surprise.
sister, I think, if I remember the story correctly, was already, gosh, what was it? Like,
yeah,
he was
there's
already,
they're all Gargans or whatever.
they're all
Gorgons.
Gorgons, but there are different
And then-
kinds. Because
Yeah.
one sister was the Gorgon of the snake, like Medusa. One
Mm-hmm.
was the Gorgon of the spider. So they were holy crap.
He's a
And the other one
Gorgon
was a
and
scorpion,
spider.
I think, or a snake. I can't remember which. But yipes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, there's some genetic diversity for you right
Yeah,
there.
that'd be
Yeah.
quite a family party.
I know a pretty woman's a pretty woman, so
Until they get turned into
Yeah, I can ignore the spider leg. Yeah.
Yeah, it was- go ahead.
But yeah, so turned her into a monster, and so yeah, again, the tales of Lamia would take form or take from this general outline, often depicting her as you said, as a serpent, half serpent, and the upper half of a woman. And she would become feared by common folk who then warn their children of this monster of the night who may come to steal them away in other tales.
Stay inside. Don't go play in the forest. Otherwise, the lobby will get you. Right.
Exactly. And there's another one I'll mention at the end too, if we get to it, as well, of Japanese lore.
Oh, let's go there now.
Okay.
I love Japanese lore. They
Yeah,
have a
we'll
demon
just
for
we can
everything.
always jump back to it. So this other child eater or child kidnapper of note is the Hachishaku-sama, which is the 8-foot tall woman.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes.
Great story. Great story.
So this is actually, I think, taken from and popularized in the Resident Evil series of recent years.
I think so, yeah.
Which I only realized this after you hear the depiction. So she's portrayed as having long black hair, a white dress, and a large white hat that covers most of her face. And of course, she's 8 foot tall.
There's a good
So
one.
hey, a hot girl is a hot girl. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, get some stilts.
So
there's a way out.
yeah, I just gotta
Sorry, yeah, that was
you
very
just
chauvinistic.
gotta stand. You stand up and
Let
do
me
it,
get
you
on
know?
this rock over here. Okay, there we are.
So legend has it that only one child was survived, and in some tales it's a boy, some tales it's a girl, whatever. But the story more or less follows the same path. So in Miyazaki, Japan, approximately summer of 1970, this young child went to visit her grandma until
I'm
her
sorry,
parents.
did you say 1970?
Yeah, so it's pretty recent. It might
she's
date
been
back
around
even
for a
farther,
very long
but
time, yeah.
yeah, but this is the one apparently where she survived, quote unquote.
Oh, someone
but-
survived an encounter?
Right. So
Okay.
that's where this tale comes from.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah. And so obviously what I'm assuming is that this is just the more modernized version of this old tale.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, also another culture determined to depict women as monsters.
I don't know what.
So well, we're not emotionally not, capable.
I mean, okay, go ahead.
um, anyway, so this young girl went to visit her grandma until her parents were to return. So she would play outdoors. She enjoyed, being free and just kind of doing what she wanted. Until one night she saw a looming figure over a tall hedge. And this figure, she basically just saw like the top of like the hat, which was really tall. But the thing that got her was like it was followed by like a chill. So it kind of gave that, dreadful feeling.
Yeah.
And then the other crux of the encounter is that it's followed by the sound of po, po, po.
What's that
Po.
word mean?
P-O. I don't know. I didn't look that up. I probably should have. But no, if you want to quickly look that up, you can. But that's the sound. I'm assuming it's just maybe a sound that's maybe we might say something different. But yeah, so the girl rushed home where she cried to her grandma about this encounter. And in some accounts, she also like locked eyes with the woman, and then in other stories, she just saw her walking past the hedge. So she rushes home and is crying to her grandma. And at first, her grandma's like, yeah, whatever, until she mentions the sound that it made, and then her grandma just freaked out and fearing for her safety, she locks her away in one of the rooms of the house and then places 4 bowls of salt in each corner of the room. And as we all know, salt is the salt purpose in paranormal. So the girl was of course confused and scared, and she wasn't supposed to leave until 7 a.m. in the morning. And she during the night would hear the tapping on the window and then the sound po po like going on.
To be clear, it's P-O, po.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Okay.
I got ho, H-O, which meant walking.
Well, yeah,
that's
what I got. Yeah,
from could not find po, so it's probably a po
it's
or something like
probably
that.
a sound.
Yeah,
po for in Google Translate. I got walking as well.
Okay,
for po for P-O.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right, ho,
that makes sense.
That does make walking. I'm walking here. She's from Jersey. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So later, either that night or one of the nights while she was still waiting for her parents to return, she hears her grandpa come to the door, and he would tell her, "It's safe. Come on out. You can leave. Like everything's good." And she, goes to the door, goes to grab the handle, and then is stricken by that fear and dread that she felt during the first encounter.
Yeah,
and she would look over to see the piles of salt turning black, and of course would then back away from the door. And then again, in some accounts, she is told to pray to the Buddha statue in the room when she feels this fear.
Okay.
And in the morning, once it was time, she could exit. And of course, she had to return to the room every night until her parents arrived. And once she left, she was told to never return to that area again. And so, because this monster would probably eat you and otherwise. And so the overall lore is that if you're a child and you lock eyes with this thing, the next day you will go missing.
Ooh,
very
interesting.
Sweet.
So
yes.
the ever blackening salt saved her.
Yeah.
Impressive.
And again, that's where we have like this connection with Lamia, and these other kind of creatures or monsters taking children. And something to note is that in certain cultures, such as early Soviet Union and China, it is apparently reported that during times of great famine, people would prey on children as a food source.
That definitely happened.
So
wicked.
There was like basically
it was like parents eating their own kids,
Well,
wow.
So in Soviet
rough.
Yeah, so in Soviet Union, there was actually like gangs of people who would go and like hunt children and like sell their meat as like horse meat or whatever. And then
Wow.
in China, there was even a tradition of where families would actually swap a child for with one another so that they could eat them to stave off hunger and then avoid eating their own family. And however, I didn't look too much farther into any of this
I
for its
wouldn't blame you.
validity.
That's gross.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
messed up
while
on
it's
levels, upon levels.
yeah, so while it's believable, it's also like convenient propaganda. So nevertheless, the fear of children being eaten is a common trope throughout history and across many cultures.
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say real quick on that. I wonder how many of those kind of stories throughout time are literally just from like parents and elders telling stories to scare kids from like going to certain places, right? Or doing certain things, you know? I feel like, especially in like ancient times, it'd be a pretty convenient excuse to like make up a story about like a ghost haunting the river or something like that because you don't want kids swimming in it, late at night or, something like that.
In general. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's done even today. Child, don't go out in that back forest. The Wooka Booka is going to get you, or
Exactly.
whatever, some
Yeah.
made up monster.
Yeah.
And there's the other side of that too, with like Santa Claus for little kids. Be
Mhm.
good, or Santa won't bring you presents.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I was
Yeah.
gonna touch on one more creature that I wish I'd had you look into. I did my own research on it for the book. This creature goes by multiple names throughout multiple cultures, primarily
Mhm.
in Southeast Asia. It's called, in Balinese, it's a layak. And basically, it's a creature that looks like, three guesses, a woman. You're correct. Looks like a beautiful woman, but at night, the head detaches from the body.
Oh,
and all of its
jeez.
organs are attached along with the spine and the intestine. And this head and organs goes flying around, and it's
Oh
a
my
super
God.
long tongue. And what it does is it hunts down and feeds upon late term pregnant women and eats the fetus
Mm.
through its long
So
tongue.
I remember you mentioned that to me, and again, like there's so much of these, it's easy to get distracted, but I just like, and the little bit that I did look into it, I could not find like the stories behind it.
Really? Oh, I
So
found tons of stuff. So
I don't know if I
it
just
down.
was spelling it wrong or I just didn't dive hard enough into it. So I definitely want to return to that at some point.
Yeah. The layaks, or again, there's multiple names for this creature from China down to the Philippines.
Wow. Okay.
But
I've never heard of that.
it's
Sounds
messed
absolutely
up.
terrifying.
I mean, that's yeah. She's almost waxen looking, like she doesn't quite look real.
Yeah.
And she's always happy, always smiling. Little grin
Oh,
on her
that's
face.
creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
We need
you
a
can ride the
movie
bus
on
next
that.
to her, and you're going, something's off about this girl, but she's super pretty, and not really give it a second thought. But then you see her head flying around.
what?
Yeah, her lower intestine touches your
Oh yeah,
hand.
right. No.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the super long tongue comes out.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah.
One thing I will add as far as like speculation with that is like it's interesting, like the fetus was like common with that and like other creatures because like
Mhm.
even today we have like the conspiracy lore of the elites using fetuses for like rejuvenation or of some kind. And
Yeah.
so I just find it
Like
interesting
stem
that
cell stuff, or what are you saying?
well, yeah, okay. So like from anything from like people actually like apparently there are celebrities like and I didn't watch this myself, so this is only like third hand like notation that I got this
Okay.
from, so don't quote me on it. But apparently Sandra Bullock uses a product that uses some sort of product from like the placenta of
A lot of cultures use placenta, believe it or
Yeah.
not.
So, so my point is with that is that like obviously there's like lots of like nutrients and stuff. So it's just interesting that like these kind of old tales of like monsters taking like the fetus of something or
Yeah,
whatever
young children,
kind of like or as like transformed into like these modern tales of like the elite, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So
Well, I see what you're
it's
saying.
eating
That's
people's babies.
interesting.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think the reason why it's so common is just because it's a common, or it's kind of a popular archetype, of a story almost, that kind of monster, right, that hunts babies or unborn fetuses or whatever. And it's just because, right, we have, as social humans, we have just such a huge desire to protect, right, those people. So it does make sense, right, that there'd be stories, like,
Yeah. No, that makes
stories like
sense.
that
Like,
would come up, like, you know multiple different times, right, through different cultures and whatever.
well,
So
and that would be also the like same kind of fear of like telling somebody to be careful the same way you would a child, of like don't do this or this will happen. And it also could be like a way of like rationalizing, if you have, accidental like
Miscarriages and stuff like
miscarriages and stuff.
that.
So um
That's what
yeah.
my thought was as well, is that it was a way to explain away miscarriages before we knew what they were. And it's like, oh,
Mhm.
the layak came and ate your baby. You're sad about it, and now you have an explanation.
such a
Yeah.
horrifying explanation. Like,
That's
you
a
couldn't
worse
come up with
explanation.
That was
anything better.
calming. I mean,
Couldn't have been
Oh
like a
my
black
God.
swan or
Jeez.
something. Like,
yeah, you ate a bad prune or
yeah,
whatever. You know, I'll take that over a lamia
yeah,
Yeah.
or
I'm
a
good.
layak any day. Oh
Jeez,
man.
yeah. Before I go into that, Noah, did you want to do anything with zombies or vampires or any
So,
add-ons?
yeah, I mean, I got a bunch of stuff, but the research kind of topic I took was more a broad overview of kind of the mythological monsters and archetypes that are found within those, because I find it really interesting, and there's a lot of similarities between them that I think is important to note about the subject. But like on zombies and all that, I know you had gone so deep into it. I just kind of like let you handle that part. So yeah, we can get into kind of what I was thinking after, if you want to go into
Okay.
your zombies and yeah, the relationship to vamps.
Okay.
Yeah, that works. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, cool. So, all right. So zombies, I think, they kind of go to the heart of our fears when it comes to the undead. They can't be reasoned with and want nothing more than to just eat your flesh and brains. Yeah. Which is interesting. So, all right, but again,
Yeah.
why? So, similarly to the vampire, as we'll see, the vampire again more likely draws from the tales of zombies. The undead have been a theme for people of many cultures, actually for at least the last 10,000 years.
Oh yeah.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
Which was actually kind of a surprise to me. Not a surprise, but I didn't realize it was that long. So,
Yeah.
Graves of humans and Neanderthals both showed ritualistic borders or rock piles being placed over graves. And archaeologists and researchers have deduced this as a sign of them fearing revenant, of course, being the more traditional word for zombie,
Right.
which is interesting and also not satisfying, because it's like maybe they're just doing it for symbolism or something. But
That's interesting you mentioned revenant, because my definition of a revenant is, and that's actually dealing with the movie I'm shooting right now or about to shoot, is that it is the ghost of a person who is so, or feels so wronged that they actually come back with so much power that they have physical form.
Oh,
And-
awesome.
Yeah. I mean, they're, in the kind of like
pretty
DiCaprio came
sick.
back. I mean, you think he was a survivor, and it turns out he wasn't,
Right.
that movie by that name. And the only way to destroy a revenant is to completely destroy it. So you got to dip it in acid, throw it in lava, keep it in one place long enough to completely destroy it, which is very interesting. I find as
I
that's
love that.
fascinating.
It's also terrifying because that's really makes it hard to kill. So
Yeah, don't wrong anybody.
Right. And it's all about mental state too. How wronged could you be? Because the guy, without giving away too much, in my story, is a serial killer who's put to death and comes back because he felt wrong.
That's a good one.
Good.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
wow.
Okay. That. Yeah, I'm into it. I can't wait to watch this. I'm gonna read your books and watch your movies. This is great. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, if you ever want to just like tell me shit on the side, I'd be excited for that.
No problem.
I won't give anything away.
Okay.
And any ideas I have, you can take them.
Okay. Right. You heard it here. I have it on record.
Yeah, it's on recording.
Gosh, Tim.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You only have to pay me if you make more than 100 grand. So
okay, hey, that's a good deal. That's a good deal.
I'll take $50. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm playing.
For the weekend.
So again, revenant was more of the traditional word for zombie, and zombie actually comes from the Haitian word Nzambi, spelled Nzambi.
There was that was my research uncovered as well. They now you're talking Haiti has not been around that long as a culture, as a nation. So
okay, I didn't realize that. So
for that, because they, like you said, it's been around for 10,000 years. It was, but it came from African tradition originally. So you're talking, I think, from the Congo area, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
And
I just got into the Haitian one a bit more, but I didn't
the
realize
Haitian's
that
a little
was
more
their...
descriptive as to what's doing what and where and all that fun stuff. And it's funny when you get into voodoo / hoodoo, you're dealing with a modality of Christianity to a degree, which just blew me away when I figured that out. When I found that out, there was actually they pray to the same saints as Christians and Catholics and stuff like that. And
oh wow.
And but they have, then you kind of get into the subset of that, which is Santeria. Sorry, I could do this whole day.
No, I'm into it. I love it.
I mean, that's when you start. Your blood sacrifice isn't goats, it isn't and larger animals, because especially in Haiti, you got to watch what you kill. Chickens,
right,
all day long. So Santeria was kind of the subset of that was a little more purely white magic, or bright, or light magic. Yeah. And that was a couple of chickens here and there, big deal. Sacrifice to a god and you're good to go. And with the more traditional voodoo / hoodoo, you're dealing, well, it's funny. There's voodoo the religion and there's hoodoo the magic.
Right.
Right. It's almost one and the same, but at the same time there is a minor separation. It's a different, really
and it's called
border.
It's called hoodoo.
The magic of voodoo is called hoodoo.
Oh my god.
And it tends to lean a little bit darker in its intent. This is where you get the zombie.
Really?
And
I would have thought voodoo was the more intense one, just based on how it sounds. Like,
well, you do have oh gosh, God, it was even in a James Bond film. That guy, with the top hat. He's an immortal.
Names.
Baron something. Samdi? Baron Samdi? I could be wrong about that.
I'm totally blanking on that.
I will look that up later. Or the audience out there, put in the comments.
And again, that's what's like so like fun about this and like challenging, because it's like each one of these, like we could sit here and talk 2 hours for just one of these.
We almost are. We're at an hour and a half just
we
haven't even cracked the top 3 of our monsters.
Exactly. Many cultures have developed tales of this revenant, such as the predominant, as you said, Haitian and voodoo cults and practitioners. We also have the Draugr from Norse myth, which I think Noah can get into a bit more, but the Draugr actually, which obviously was, I will mention, famously portrayed in the game Skyrim, because I love that game. But they actually portrayed it well, because the Draugr, which means again walker, actually differs from your typical revenant zombie by displaying magical and supernatural powers, including
and they're a little more intelligent too, right?
Yeah,
just,
yeah. So they have like intent.
They have everything that made them up comes back.
Right. And they even have shape shifting. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
In addition, I know you're gonna love the mention, is we have the Strigoi of Romanian lore. Also quite near the vampire, seeing as it shapeshifted and drank blood.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like when you read these, like the vampire and the zombie share such a close origin, and the zombie was older. So I think like the empires really came from zombies.
It's entirely possible. They're making things up, and they're, I said, Bram Stoker really gave us the Western modern vampire.
So
go ahead.
The Chinese have the Jiangxi, which means stiff corpse.
Yep. They hop.
And yes, they hop. Oh, yes. No. And they're also similar to vampires in ways as well.
Almost exactly, actually. But they hop. Do you know why they hop?
No, I did cover this at one point, but I didn't write it down, so no.
It's because when you bury people in China back in the old days anyway, they used to tie their legs together just as a matter of course. When they get up, they hop.
Wow. They'd all be hopping.
That's hilarious.
They hop after you. Yeah. Here comes the vampire. Hop. And they don't go very fast because they're as slow as zombies for sure. I mean, as more traditional zombies.
They fall over.
Hop.
In a weird way,
do it forever. Like... They're never going to run out of steam. But you can take a break, go get a dinner, coffee, whatever, and say, "Oh yeah, what's his name's coming after us again? Okay, let's go."
That's almost more terrifying in a way.
It's like Pepe Le Pew. But evil.
Yeah.
Because Pepe Le Pew always hopped along. He was very happy. Everyone else was scrambling to get away from him. And he always managed to catch up. I digress. Go ahead. Say that again.
I said until there's a horde of them chasing after you.
Yeah,
and it'd be like,
oh my God.
Yeah, like
you could still go get dinner around the corner. It's like, man.
What if their shoes come untied? Would they be able to run?
If they Well, apparently they were just stuck that way because of some sort of rigor mortis. I don't know how the Chinese legend actually plays out completely.
Okay.
But somehow they always stayed in that form. They always had to hop around everywhere.
Right.
Or they skittered almost like that geisha shuffle to give it I know that's Japanese.
Oh yeah.
But
it's so creepy, like to think of for some reason.
Right. I'll hop after you. Don't make me hop after you.
Yeah.
I'll be down the gun shop.
Oh.
Okay.
I'm just picturing like they're almost like these like little like undead rabbits that could kill you.
Yeah, human size.
Monty Python rises again. Okay, go ahead.
So something that I noticed that all of these have in common, as well, is the belief that certain people have a higher propensity or risk of becoming undead.
Yeah.
Such as those who are murdered, commit suicide, or any sort of unnatural cause of death. And the other aspect they have in common is, of course, rising at night to feed on the living. Also to note, I couldn't find anything that ever really specifies them eating brains until
I know what
George
you're gonna say, Romero.
George Romero's 1968 Night of the Living Dead, except it wasn't even Romero. He's known.
It was his assistant director. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who picked
So
up the thing.
yeah. So
yeah, go ahead.
Well, go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say he kind of picked up the reins after the first movie. And when they said we need a sequel, and Romero said, nope. You get that one and that's it.
So
and
it's
so
interesting.
Go ahead.
No, I didn't realize you were done. My bad. Keep going.
Oh, I'm sorry. So his assistant director says, give me director, I'll do it. I bumped the mic. My apologies. Make me director, I'll do it. And I think in the third or fourth one, they needed an explanation. Someone said, why brains? Why the hell do they need brains? So they came up with this really convoluted need for serotonin. They starved for serotonin.
Oh my
God, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, really? Serotonin? I mean, okay, applause for looking up things in a medical book, but come on.
Living Dead are like of the Living Dead title. Anything with that went to his partner.
Yeah.
And then anything of the dead, Romero kept.
Yeah.
And so again, so like Romero is known to question why people even ask him, because he doesn't know. He's like, I don't know where the brains thing came from. And he'd be like, people ask me to write, like when I sign an autograph, they're like, write eat brains. And he's like, I don't even know why you want me to write that. Like, so
his partner came up with it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow.
So, where did that come from? The first trace of zombies eating brains actually can be traced to the 1985 The Return of the Living Dead.
Yep, that's the one.
Really?
Which was
wow.
Yeah. So that was directed by Dan O'Bannon.
Yep.
And
sure was.
Where zombies can be seen eating brains, and also possibly more popularized, of course, by The Simpsons. 1992, Treehouse of Horror, Dial Z for Zombie segment.
Yes. Great moment where a zombie goes after Homer, sniffs at him, brains. Nope. None there.
So
when I was doing Haunting, I was a zombie. I did a haunted attraction. I still do, actually. I've been doing it for over years, decades, actually, 30 years almost. And I use that trick on people all the time. Brain. Nope. And move on.
That's hilarious.
It was a nice little slam. I wasn't intending to, but oh, you're so stupid. I stopped doing it because people get razzed left, right, and center.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Go up to like the big buff dude and just be like, oh, there's nothing in there.
Moving
on. Yeah, so that's kind of where that got popularized. It's like a modern iteration of the zombie.
Very modern, yeah. But there was the reason I asked about brains initially is sorry about that. I knew the answer, but at the same time, it made me wonder, why did he choose brains? And I never got that answer. So, and I think he alluded to something else, like another horror or monster from past lore, for example, that did specifically go after brains, but there were it was some desert dwelling, like it was in the old Arabia area, old Egypt area, where there was a monster that did go specifically after brains. I think it was a worm of some sort.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. That might be more based off like a real parasite or something.
Could be.
Maybe,
Could be.
yeah,
But apparently
yeah.
this worm was gigantic, like some 8-foot thing to rear up like a dune worm or something.
Oh.
But it just eats your head.
It
Oh
just
my god.
chomps down on your head and that's it.
Jeez.
And a bunch of headless corpses are laying around somewhere.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's like the purple worm from D&D.
Nice callback. Oh, that's awesome. Played D&D in 1,000 years. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're big D&D players, so.
Oh, are you still
yeah.
playing? Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, we played it. Yeah.
I'll have to jump in on your game one of these days.
Oh my god, I'd love to. Actually, I'm trying to work on a like where you're a paranormal team and then you go after Bigfoot kind of thing. I think that'd be really fun. So yeah, definitely have to get you in on that.
That'd be fun.
Again, like the whole brains thing, like you said, like it was they gave the serotonin as like the reason, but there was because George Romero's like thing was like it's not about zombies, like they don't even matter. It's about like how are the humans reacting to them.
Exactly.
You know, but of course we all want to know how does a zombie function. So
like the first question,
yeah.
It's like
so
why?
yeah.
and in the first film, he never ever lets on to why they rise at all. They just suddenly popping out of the ground.
Yep. So honorable mention of the first portrayal of zombies was in film was actually Victor Halperin's White Zombie, which was about a Haitian priest who becomes a zombie via magic potion.
Yes. The good old magic
makes
potion.
sense.
Also the inspiration for Rob Zombie's White Zombie album.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, Rob Zombie's a huge film nut. I mean, more so than most people even know, even with his directing background.
Yeah. He's like the Tarantino of horror, basically.
Yeah, the good way to put it. Yeah,
for
sure. Good way to put it.
But yeah, so zombies in stories are either portrayed as magical curse, biological virus, which such as The Walking Dead, the show and the video game The Last of Us, and Rockstar Game Company's Red Dead Redemption expansion Undead Nightmare. And each of those
you for just a second.
Yeah, go for it.
Me, does The Last of Us have the fungus zombies, or am I thinking of something else?
Yes, and I can explain a bit about that too.
Yeah.
The fungus zombies were my favorite. It's like, oh, come on.
Well, this is what's actually great. So, I actually find the Last of Us franchise to be the most interesting explanation.
Oh yeah, me too.
Of why they eat, right? Because that's why we're here, right? Like, why are we getting eaten by undead? And so again, like similar to the whole how the vampire virus would work. I love this because so essentially they used cordyceps, which is again is a type of fungus. Because and it's not just like they're not eating just to eat, they're eating to spread the cordyceps. Which is to me a lot more satisfying answer.
It is a little more satisfying of an answer, but at the same time, the problem I have with a fungus is it envelops everything completely in reality versus adapting to a given bioform. It'll just
interesting you say that because the cordyceps being a form of fungus, of course, this actually does exist in the real world. So there are 35 known Orpheocordyceps that affect the behavior of insects and possibly hundreds more yet to be discovered. So these particular cordyceps do exactly as The Last of Us Undead portray.
I stand corrected. That is spot on.
Which is where they get it from. So they infect the host, kill it, and then take over the motor functions to drive the host body, and then of course infect more of its own kind.
Wow.
Yeah, I heard of one. It was like an ant that had been taken over, and like you could see the fungus growing out of it.
Yeah.
And like I think it did like a suicide basically, and like
Yeah.
jumped off a tree, or it basically killed itself in order to spread the spore.
Oh,
Yeah,
crazy.
they'll infect ants and beetles, and they'll drive them into their own colonies where it can spread. And yeah, so it's actually quite terrifying.
That
However,
is terrifying. I mean, based on that kind of reality, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah,
so it
it's
really
here
does
already.
exist.
That's amazing.
The only difference is that for us, we don't have to worry because our bodies are too warm for cordyceps to survive.
That makes sense.
So, you know, unless we ever see a strain such as that is what's portrayed in The Last of Us, you know, then
Fingers
we'd have a
crossed we don't.
problem. Yeah,
Right.
because that would actually be a problem. So,
A little bit.
so, yeah, so it seems to me that like the concept of undead has much more to do with our fear and of our own mortality. You know, monsters, cryptids, you know, they all seem to personify the most like negative or extreme aspects of our humanity.
Yeah.
You know, and zombies seem to be like at the core of this, as I like mentioned in the beginning. And the way I think of it is this: is like as our ancestors developed, they would have learned like fairly quickly that dead humans are a health hazard. So today we can explain this all through biology, but in the past, most people, you know, only had magic or legend, you know, to describe the happenings of the world around them. So it seems natural that building and retaining the horrific stories of the dead, returning to feed on the living, is actually a rather effective means of carrying on the knowledge to bury or burn the dead in order to protect the living from dysentery and disease.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And on that,
yeah.
there's a really interesting story in the Norse exactly about this with the afterwalkers, like you mentioned earlier.
Oh,
And
go for it.
yeah, so basically it's in the saga. It's called the Saga of the Sandbank Dwellers. And essentially, let's see, it's been a while since I've read through it, but I have quite a bit of notes on it. But essentially, it's this troublemaker who let's see, who gets his son to rob his neighbor, or who tries to get his son to rob his neighbor, and his son won't do it. And Thorolf goes back to his home very disappointed. So this is one of the tropes in kind of Norse zombie legend, is that when a father is extremely disappointed and then he dies in his home, that's one of the warning signs of like becoming a zombie.
Gotcha.
And yeah, so Thorolf goes back to his home disappointed, and he's sitting upright at the dinner table, and he dies with his eyes open. And this is like another kind of trope in the Norse, is that they are super, super stiff, and they turn hard, basically hard as stone and heavy as stone. So they're very hard to move, and they have their eyes open.
Oh.
And basically there's a certain way that his son has to get him out of the house to like prevent him from coming back, because he has all these warning signs, right, that he's going to become this afterwalker. Okay. So he basically has to like throw a bag on his head and like wrestle his dead corpse to the ground, and then he has to bust down a hole in his wall and drag him out the hole through the hole he just made, because you're not supposed to take him through the front door. So you have to make another hole to take him out, so they can't come back in the house.
Gotcha.
And yeah, so he essentially buries him, and but he still comes back as an afterwalker and starts like terrorizing the people who are living there. And one of the other things with the afterwalkers is they love to kill and eat cattle, which is really weird. That's like their thing, is they go into like cattle ranches and they terrorize the cows and whatnot, and kill them and ride them. And
ride them, as in
ride them,
get on.
yeah
like before they kill them or after?
Probably before, I think. It doesn't
ride them to death and then eat them.
Yeah.
This gives like a This is a whole new explanation to cattle mutilations.
Oh,
yeah, right.
Yeah,
It's an aftermarker. I
seriously.
knew it.
Yeah, and I don't really know why cattle specifically. I mean, I know it was a huge part of their culture, like raising cattle and
Mhm.
doing all that. So I think maybe that had something to do with it. Just the fact it was such a big part that there would be stories of zombies that would go after their cattle, right? Because that is their livelihood.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's just kind of going on what Zoe was saying is like within these stories of zombies, there are like they can explain how to deal with dead bodies and you know what to do if you encounter them, or like how it is with the Norse, at least with this one story, which is a pretty good
Interesting.
example.
And they go through all the steps on how to deal with it, which I like.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
good.
They make it very clear to follow. Like this is what you do. And
It's kind of
yeah,
like,
it's a fun story, but it you know it does go to show that yeah they can encode some of that knowledge within the
although
story.
I imagine the whole like busting a hole into the back of your house is kind of like not. I mean, they're in the winter, like the
Yeah.
weather up there. Like now
A
you got to
little
repair a
overkill.
hole, and
And he still comes back to the house. Yeah, I think he kills his wife too.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, yeah, he takes her
Whoops,
with
sorry.
him.
I lost my earbud there.
Oh, you're good.
Okay.
oh my gosh.
That's a crazy. Thanks, man. That's awesome.
I guess I'll wrap up with zombies a little bit here
Sure.
with like basically like, you know, my question is like, is there actually any validity to some of these legends that go beyond conventional or scientific explanation? Because it seems like science is still trying to catch up to the world of magic and the paranormal rather than the other way around. And maybe that's just my opinion. But I do question if there was, like you said, like even a truth once in history, like that the dead came to life. But
Otherwise, why go through all this? I mean,
yeah,
lock them down. It's like, oh no, that dead person's not getting up.
right.
I mean,
So when regarding the Haitian voodoo or hoodoo, there is supposedly a brew that can make the living subject docile and obedient to command.
Yeah.
So this concoction is apparently from pufferfish,
Yep.
where they create a deadly neurotoxin known as tetrodotoxin.
Yeah.
And this is to me, believable considering the effects of certain chemicals like
it's been proven.
yeah, like
It's
the
been proven.
Never heard of that.
The
yeah.
actual brew, yeah, they've it's been proven.
Oh,
They've actually
okay.
seen it work.
But just it's terrifying. So you just
Yeah,
you literally
lose
become
all
a
control.
zombie
It's like,
subject to
okay.
command.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
What the hell?
You'll be worked forever until you break on a given task. There was a story in the 1990s. It's not that long ago, 1990s, where a guy was give this brew, and
What's it called?
It's tetrodotoxin. It's from
it's
a
a derivative
pufferfish.
of it. It's made
At least
with
that's
that.
the toxin.
That's-
Yeah.
That's the toxin
Okay.
part of it. That's just part of the brew, though.
Yeah, and
But,
it's from Haitian, right?
It's
I wanna look
Yeah.
into
it's a
that.
Haitian
That's
voodoo
interesting.
brew.
Okay.
And so this guy is given some, and he loses like 3 years.
What
And when
the
he's
hell?
finally found and brought, he has to be told what to do at first, because
Mhm.
they keep having to dose him with this stuff in order to keep him, in servitude.
Really?
But they finally bring him out of it, and he doesn't look like himself at all, because he's lost all kinds of weight. He's practically a walking skeleton, and
Yeah.
his hands are marred from all this hard work he was doing. I think he was dealing with like quarry work or mine work or something like that.
Oh,
And barehanded, that's rough. But yeah, so he gets, he starts coming back after, I think it took a day after they found him for things to even start to begin to ebb. And he finally recognized his wife, and that took a couple of days. Then his memories started flooding back. It's like, yeah, I went over to this hut over here. They gave me this drink. They said it was a traditional drink, and I dishonor them and their ancestors if I didn't drink it. That was a common ploy. And so I drank it, and that's the last thing I remember. I was like, wow, really? So yeah, this guy was apparently some millionaire or something. He was going to do some development down in Haiti or something like that, and he disappeared for 3 years, and all of his projects tanked. Yeah.
Wow.
All of his projects tanked, and I think maybe that was the reason, that was the motivation. They didn't want any of this development to happen, so they gave him the brew.
Took him out of the game. Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Those Haitians.
That's like honestly like one of my worst fears, because like I've always like had sleep paralysis throughout my life. So it's like one of the worst like things is to just like be in your body and you can't move. Like, oh my God, no.
I've experienced that before.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That's pretty
so yeah, along with this tetrodotoxin, you also have things like sodium pentothal, studies regarding the power of suggestion in general. So like these kind of things, as far as explanations behind like a true zombie. Similarly, we also have an accounted for like phenomenon called split brain syndrome. Have you heard of this?
Is that the severing of that interconnective tissue between the two halves of the brain? Or am I thinking of something else?
So it can happen via a chemical induction, or like being induced with, I don't know if the induction is the right word, but induced with a certain chemical. But it's also just like a syndrome that can occur in certain people.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure how, but essentially it's where the corpus callosum, which is the part of the brain responsible for allowing the two hemispheres to communicate, becomes dysfunctional or like shut off altogether. So this leads to symptoms of epilepsy and other issues, which was another interesting thing. You mentioned epilepsy earlier.
Yeah.
So the the two hemispheres of the brain will develop their own perspective and thought patterns independent of one another.
Oh, that's got to be unnerving.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I can't even fathom that. Yeah.
Having
two different thought patterns.
That's just like,
but right brain, I want to do this. No, left brain, we do this.
Right. And it's almost like you're two people or something, which is also like they get into like those studies get into like
split personality,
split personality, but also like do they have two forms of consciousness within the same brain?
Which I'm sure is impossible to measure.
So but some studies have shown that there is still like some form of communication when the corpus callosum is disabled. But but sightings of actual undead, like much like other legendary monsters, like seem to be unsubstantiated beyond anecdotal evidence. There are accounts of people having been buried alive while in that near death-like state, as you mentioned. And then, basically being mispronounced as dead. And then the other cases would be like drug abuse and that allow you to make people display certain behavior, like that old, not old, but the bath salts thing in Florida.
I was just going to say bath salts,
yeah.
The Florida case, yeah.
And then there was like another one I read
Chewing on
like
some dude's face. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Oh my
God. So there was supposedly a kid who he supposedly like was clean in his toxicology report, but then they did like say he had a drug problem, so I don't know. But apparently like the kid just like went over to his neighbor's house and like murdered them and started eating their bodies and faces for no reason. So yeah, good signs.
Hey, it's Tuesday at 3:00. Let's go.
Yeah. Party time.
Some faces.
Do I want Fruity Pebbles or Mr. and Mrs. Pebbles? But yeah, it was anyways. So which is kind of interesting because like I listen to a lot of podcasts and like a lot of different, I can read on different things, and like I've heard plenty of stories of like Sasquatch that I'm like, I believe the person telling the story. or like I've had my own paranormal experiences, but like I never hear anything about zombies, like an actual zombie. So
Yeah, that's so true.
That's a good point.
That's why to me, like I'll just conclude with like it seems to be one, making the reason why zombies eat people is because it makes us remember to bury the dead so we don't get sick. And two, is just that like there are other states that are zombie like that could allow somebody to behave, in a way that they eat a person or whatever. So yeah,
Yeah,
as far as like zombies go, it's like why? It's just like
cool.
kind of like same with vampires, like depends on where you what you're reading.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. For the remainder of this segment, I will be handling the werewolf section on my own. We were about to record a part 2 with my guests from before back in 2023, but a horrible family tragedy befell them, so they could not continue. It was a year ago, but nonetheless, my sincerest hopes and prayers go out to you guys. You're good people, and you didn't deserve what happened. They are fine, but a family member of theirs passed rather suddenly. So on to werewolves. At least in the West, as far as Western civilization goes, in ancient Greece, the werewolf starts with Lycon. Lycon was a king in Arcadia. And Lycon was kind of he's a bit of a bastard, really. He defied the gods as often as he could, purposefully, and he thought because he was king, he was all but untouchable, and it came to pass one day that Zeus visits him in his court. And Zeus is in disguise initially, but Lycon picks up on the fact that Zeus is in attendance. So he says, well, I'll teach this god. I'll feed him a supper of human flesh. And actually kills a kid and serves it. He tries to trick Zeus into partaking of human flesh. And even for the gods, cannibalism is abhorrent. Now, side note, if gods aren't human, why do they find cannibalism abhorrent? Were gods really enhanced humans? Let's go back to the story. Something to ponder for later, I suppose. But so Zeus, with his godly power and perception, detects the foul contents of his meal, and he erupts at Lycon, yells at him, and the two go back and forth in a brief argument about who is deceiving who. That Zeus came here under disguise to test Lycon, and Lycon was perceptive enough to see who Zeus really was and decided to test his own resolve. Well, who is Lycon to test a god? And pretty much right there, be it a thunderbolt was cast or some sort of magic gesture or who knows what, Lycon is transformed into a wolf. And it is apparently the most agonizing thing, not only to watch, but apparently to experience. Lycon screams and yells as his body contorts and breaks and readjusts itself right out of the movies. I mean, those horrible transformations we see in the more popular werewolf movies happens to Lycon. And he is turned into this beast and made to be a wandering wolf for the rest of his days as punishment. From that point forward, we, at least in Western culture, have the werewolf. It's interesting to note that not long after that episode in Greek mythology, Zeus floods the world in anger at what he sees. Another parallel. We have Noah and his flood. There's a few other flood myths out there all around the same time when this actually occurred across the earth. That has been scientifically proven. We did experience a global flood. It has been documented by several cultures. There are several stories about it. And there are, pieces of evidence around the world that are being found every day that back up the claim. So we know the flood happened. So, if the world was flooded, why do we still have werewolves in our mythos, at least? Maybe they were not unlike the Nephilim at the time, or the giants, or whatever it is you want to call them. Six-fingered, polydactic, big people, really big people, who scoured the mountaintops to escape the flooding. Scoured? Scrambled. They climbed to the mountains to get to the top. Anyway, a lot of our would-be fabled monsters disappear for a bit after the flood. Let's fast forward to the 15th century. Europe, chiefly England, but some in Germany and some in France and those places. The witch trials start sparking. And along with the witch trials are the werewolf trials, and they're usually side by side. The basic overture that's offered is that the witches have cursed certain men and or women, to be afflicted as Lycon was, to be able to transform into a wolf or a werewolf or some hybrid beast in between a man and a wolf that we all know far too well, especially today with books and television shows and movies about the subject almost ad nauseum. I mean, I enjoy a good werewolf story. I don't know if you do, but I certainly do. Where does that really come into play for our inquiry into these monsters? The question is, what are the dietary requirements of monsters? And for werewolves, it's hearts. Hearts. Yep, hearts. Now, that's not to say that werewolves, like their animal brethren or counterparts or whatever it is you want to call them, real wolves aren't known to dive in and just munch down on pretty much everything in the softer parts of a given animal or a kill, yeah, including the hearts. But why hearts? And this is going back to the 15th century, where the average statement of a witness goes a little something like this. Hark, I saw him, that man right there, and names him. We'll call him John Smith for now. But I see, yea and lo, and howdy ho, I saw John Smith in the forest. A judge would ask, where did you see John Smith in the forest? Well, at the Northern Crossing, as an example. I'm just kind of ad-libbing this a little. At the Northern Crossing. Okay, what did you see exactly? The judge asks. And the witness says, hark. Sorry, I'm having too much fun with that part. I see John Smith as an animal, as a wolf, hovered over a body, picking at it, as a wolf does. How do you know this wolf was John Smith? The judge would ask. And the witness would go on to say, lo, sorry, he stood and ran off as a beast would, but on two legs. He passed behind a large tree or a large clump of trees, and from hence I see John Smith as a man running away as fast as he can. Me and my hunting party give chase and catch up to John Smith cowering behind a rock covered in blood. And that is the average witness statement given at most werewolf trials. Basically that theme, I guess I should say. And then we go back, the judge would probably go back to the body of this victim, that the wolf slash John Smith was gnawing on. And what was missing from the body, he would ask a doctor. Oh, the heart. Other parts are gnawed on as well, but the heart oddly was missing. Just the heart, no other organs, just the heart. Some meat from the ribs, maybe, some meat from the thighs, but other than that, it was the heart. Yep, not kidding you. Look it up for yourself. If you don't believe me, a lot of those statements and witness statements given in those trials, and they are recorded. They're hard to find, but they're out there. Go a little something exactly like that, what I just stated. So my hearts, my investigation into this peculiar dietary requirement goes back to Lycon himself, at least in Western myth. In that, Lycon, a king, obviously went hunting because they do that as sport. Not that he didn't have hunters and other such people to go out there and kill his meal for him, but a king, especially a king, is what's layered, just dripping with hubris. Like, I'm the best, I'm the greatest, I'm going to shoot my own meal. Haha, I'm the manliest of men, I am the king. Yada yada yada. And he would go out and kill his own, meal. And hunting tradition, going even further back, always holds that if the animal's suffering, put them out of their misery first, cut them open, cut out the heart, and take a bite out of it. This gives you the animal's strength, his spirit, and in some cultures would give reverence to the gods. Yep. So, taking that, assuming all werewolves, at least in Western Europe, hail from some sort of lineage, either direct or indirect, from King Lycon. Werewolves eat hearts for glory, and they'll eat the rest of their kill for food. That's it. Now, I know there are a lot of holes in this story. The most unassailable question is, how did werewolves survive? Well, if you want to take the giants of Afghanistan, for example, as I said before, probably climbed a mountain. Well, wolves can climb mountains like anyone else. And if you have the ability to shift back to a person, you have even more tools to survive. If you have a man's resourcefulness, you can do a little fishing, especially when the water level's at the top of a mountain. You can, other animals are going to flock to higher ground, those who weren't saved by the ark or the various arks throughout the various cultures. They have a very similar story to Noah. So, yeah, there were a lot of leftover species, and everyone's going to go to high ground or dry ground at the very least. And it's going to be easy pickings for a predator, realistically. That's basically, I think, if we're going to follow this through line, that's how I would anticipate or expect a fallen king who had been turned into a savage beast and able to, at one point or another, turn back into a man, perhaps at will, perhaps through some other sort of manipulation or magic or what have you. And we really have to take big leaps and bounds in modern logic to overcome that and make that stick, even a little. So, where all the other werewolves come from if he was the first? Well, interesting thing. Culturally, I mean, across the globe, and this kind of ties into my M theory, paranormal M theory, at around the same time as this was supposed to have happened, there were other such occurrences where a person in charge or a person of importance, in one way or another, blasphemed against the gods of their culture. And for their punishment, they were turned into beasts and made the Rome as beasts. And eventually they learned or picked up on a way on how to turn to a man, but it's fleeting. You're either an animal or a man, or an animal or a man, and you can change into some other animal sometimes. And it's just wolves. It's jackals in some cultures. I think there's tigers in some cultures. snakes, like big big pythons, excuse me, that's what I tried to say. And other creatures, a boar, I think, were-boars, were-tigers, whatever. Pick an animal that's kind of savage and scary in given cultures at that era, if not now, and you pretty much will find a story that says, yeah, long ago, king or shaman or whoever ticked off the gods, and the gods' punishment turned into this beast-like creature. So why are there so many of them, Tim? We see dogman reports in Wisconsin. We see dogman reports in England. Are they the same thing? Probably. Some would say interdimensional interference or crossing over, portals opening. Possibly. There's the more traditional ways that the werewolf bite, assuming they don't kill you, acts as a transformative mechanism, a mutagen, if you will, and turns you, someone who would be prey, into a werewolf. Other ways to become a werewolf include basic genetic breeding. You turn into a person, you find your husband or wife or whatever, and you proceed to copulate in a normal way, and there you go. Baby with werewolf traits. Another way, and it's one of my favorites, is if you were in the forest and it has just been raining and you see a particularly large wolf print in the mud and it's filled with some rainwater, if you drink said rainwater, you will turn into a werewolf eventually by the next moon. Other fun ways you could turn into the werewolf include wearing a wolf's pelt. Now, if you wear said pelt during a moon, of a specific moon, I think it has to be a blood red moon, or it has to be, I think, either maybe even a blue moon or a what they call a silver moon, and you're wearing a wolf's pelt, you will be turned into a werewolf. Then there's some other stuff like curses and spells and all the rest of it. There's the accidental transformation, which essentially is the same thing. You're bitten by a werewolf out in the world, or you're scratched by one. That's another part. You can get scratched by one. This mutagenic compound, whatever it happens to be, this lycanthropy gets passed onto you, and you are a werewolf. There's also the other side of that, which is the voluntary transformation. You lash yourself out to a tree or something, and you make yourself a meal for a werewolf. Assuming they don't kill you, you will indeed turn into a werewolf. Some of the benefits of being a werewolf: you have pretty rapid healing, like Wolverine style. You have enhanced senses, even as a person. So you have, wolf hearing and wolf sense of smell, and wolf eyes, which gives you like a 40% thermal infrared capability, which apparently you could turn on and off at will with practice. Downside is every time there's a full moon, you better lock yourself away or go out way deep in the forest where you won't kill anything other than a deer or a boar or something relatively inconsequential, as long as it isn't a person. And that's pretty much it for that. That's werewolves and why they eat hearts. My name is Tim Sudano. This has been a blast. Until next time, good night and have a good rest of the week. And happy holidays. If you have a paranormal experience that you would like to discuss on the show, please email us at paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com. That's paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com.